Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we have an incredible figure to take a look at, and potentially this is going to be one of my favorite Ceratopsian series releases ever. We have the Torosaurus in the Fans Choice color scheme. Obviously, this is a Beasts of the Mesozoic release, and you can see here with the front of the box and everything, it looks really nice. The artwork is beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, and the figure itself is obviously shown here in the window area. This paint scheme is a Walking with Dinosaurs style paint scheme, so that's actually three technically, but two Walking with Dinosaurs paint schemes from the original series, and one paint scheme that was replicated from the 3D movie with the Rhinosaurus. So obviously we love our Walking with Dinosaurs. You can again see though that everything looks pretty much as it usually does here on the front of the box. And then as we turn it around here to the back, we can see the other Ceratopsians that are in the Fans Choice line, which we have reviewed all of. Well, we will once we're done this, except for the Styracosaurus, which there are actually two different variants of that Styracosaurus. But you can also see over here a sneak peek of the collectible card that is contained within, and then some information on the dinosaur down here. So let's pop this box open and check out our beautiful Torosaurus. So, as always, you are given the tail assembly instructions. Again, very important to listen to, or else you'll probably damage your figure. Really important for this one specifically, because I had a heck of a time getting the tail on. So, very important, again, to pay attention to that. You also have the amazing card. That is just awesome artwork. That actually might be my favorite artwork for any of the Ceratopsians so far. I just really, really love that image. And then here on the back, a little dino toy photography, as well as the information on the species itself. And then, of course, we've got ourselves the Torosaurus, and it looks about as epic as you would expect it to. Again, with those beautiful Walking with Dinosaurs colors, it does look really, really nice. I think they did a very good job on this one. Might potentially be my favorite version of the Torosaurus. Like, I'm gonna have to bring the blue one in a little while, the original release, and try to look at it with this one to see which one I prefer, but I honestly think I prefer this one. It's going to be a tough call, though, because the blue one was really cool. But again, they definitely did a great job from what I can tell so far, but the only way to truly tell is with a closer look, so let's do that right now. So, we have, of course, reviewed the Torosaurus sculpt in the past. We reviewed it with the initial version. Unlike the Styracosaurus, I don't feel like there's anything different about this one. I haven't heard of David switching it up at all, and I haven't heard of any updates to the sculpt itself, which means we do not need to go over the sculpt again, as we've already done that. If you'd like to see a more detailed review of the actual sculpt, check out the original review of this figure. Again, I will include a link in the description, as well as at the end of the video, to the initial review of the Torosaurus. But that means we only really need to go over the coloration of this one. So if you get nice and close, you can straight away see that we have this nice dark tone here moving up along. It's like a mixture of greens and blacks, and that kind of stripes down here through the snout. Underneath that, you have a really nice variation of like a reddish brown. And then as you move down a little bit further, you kind of have like an orangish brown, and then kind of like a khaki, a little bit more of an alternate tone of brown. And again, you can just see, as always, they add a lot of color, making sure it looks really nice, really lifelike, very realistic. And the actual application of the paint, as per usual, is very nicely done. You can see that they've nicely dry brushed the scale detail out very realistically, added in some really smooth transitions, some nice washes, all of the stuff that we've come to know and love when it comes to a Beasts of the Mesozoic paint job. You can also see the beak is painted very nicely with kind of like a khaki-ish type of a tone, but they've dry brushed like some black over top, even darkened the tip of the lower jaw here of the beak, and that gives it that nice kind of like a dirty, gritty look, and also adds a nice bit of realism as always, but also kind of highlights the detail there in the beak, shows off how nice the actual sculpt and detail is. Of course, as always, you've got yourself an articulated jaw. The inside of the mouth sports a nice purplish tone. You can see everything looks really good in there. We have a nice gloss coat, and even though it gets awfully dark there in the back of the mouth. You can see the tongue is sculpted out in there. We can kind of see some teeth and everything back there, which the teeth are all painted as well. Something that you'll always find when it comes to the beasts of the Mesozoic. I did notice that this is kind of sticking down under the lower jaw when the mouth is closed. I don't remember if my initial one did that. It's kind of an eyesore for the figure. Once you open it to that point, it looks really good, but when it's closed, that does stand out. Now, I don't recall if the original one had that issue. I'll have to check that out. But as you move up, you again have this nice variation of like a very dark green that kind of like leaks and borders around the eye socket area. We also have kind of like an off-white that kind of designs there around the eye. The eye itself is painted with a yellow, given a black pupil, but it actually has a very slight amount of like a pinkish or a reddish tone behind the yellow. Like, it's very, very hard to pick up on, but it's such a really cool little subtle addition to the figure that I do quite like. As you move back, you can see again we have like a pinkish tone here, as well as some reds that kind of design in there. There's also a little cluster of scales here that contain a nice kind of an off-white with a dark wash. And then as you move up a little bit further, you start to see again more of that darker coloration lead up into the frill, and you can see all of the kind of darker coloration basically firing back there into the reddish tones as we lead up, and we again have that nice design. You can also see that lighter kind of a pinkish tone runs the outer edge of the frill of the Torosaurus, and you can see that that darker green kind of stripes in throughout. We have that kind of pinkish tone showing back. It's almost like a peach, actually, showing back up here in the center of the sides of the frills. So you can see that on each side here we have that sort of like a peach type tone. We also have this almost like mustardy greenish type of a color with a black that designs around it. Actually, I apologize, it's not a black, it's a dark green. It's a very, very dark tone of green though. And you can see it gives this nice kind of almost like a eyeball sort of an appearance in that area. Again, very reminiscent to the Walking with Dinosaurs Torosaurus. And then as you lead down, you have more of that reddish tone running down the center of the frill, with more of those greens kind of designing through before transitioning entirely to that dark green here on the top of the head. I love that as we lead out into the horns, we have that darker green following out into the horns before we transition to that kind of khaki color, but they've also lightly dry brushed a lighter tone, sort of like an off-white, over the horns to really make those details pop on the horns. And you can see we again darken to a nice tip for both horns. Similar coloration for the horn, but this one has more of like a darker tone similar to what we see on the beak. But if we head over here to the opposing side of the head, you can again see that the frill looks the same up there as far as that paintwork goes. And then leading down here into the face, again, everything looks just as nice, just as precise as what we had seen on the initial side. Perfectly placed eye, nice gloss coat on the eye as well. Then as we lead back here into the neck, you start to see again more of that reddish tone picking up, as well as more of that very dark green leading back here. We do have a nice kind of like an off-white with sort of like a reddish wash or an orangish wash underneath here for the underside of the dinosaur. And as you move back, you can see some really nice variations of oranges and kind of like reddish browns throughout. As you lead down into the front leg, you again see that nice mixture of those colors. You also see more of that darker green leading down a little ways into the front leg there. And then we continue to have, again, that nice mixture. It's like a like an orangish brown with kind of like a yellowish wash, or maybe the orangish brown has been dry brushed over. And then you lead down into the foot, and they've done a very good job of highlighting the scales down here with that lighter tone, and then dry brushing the scales out very nicely, making them pop. And you can see that the nails are painted with a nice glossy black. As you lead back up here into the stomach, you again have that kind of orangish color with that reddish sort of a dry brushing over top, again highlighting the scales but making them pop so nicely with that orange coloration underneath. And then you have a little pale area here in the side of the stomach with sort of an off-white. You can also see that there's a tone of color underneath that as well, kind of like a yellowish tone potentially. And then as you lead back up to the top, you again have that dark green with some brown spots and designing up here running along the top of the dinosaur. You can see it's actually almost like a chocolate bar brown here before transitioning to almost like a greenish brown back here. So the color does change a little bit. As you lead down into the thigh, you again have that darker green, transitioning back to the same style of coloration that we had for the front leg, but you can see that we get that lighter tone here of the underbelly on the rear of the thigh. And then as we move down, again, same style of paintwork, same style of coloration as to what we had on the front leg, nicely painted nails, yet again, same black tone. And then you lead back out to the tail here. You just basically have the dark green. You've got the mixture of like oranges and yellows, and then the lighter tone of the underside. You can see the entire underside sports that same style of that lighter tone moving through, which looks very, very nice. And then, of course, if we turn it around, take a look at the initial side, it's all going to look the same as what we had just seen on the previous side. Really nice looking paintwork overall. And again, honestly, I don't know if I like this one better than the bluer one or if I like the blue one better than this one. I'll have to really, decide when I bring the two in together, but this is definitely another phenomenal repaint on the part of the Beasts of the Mesozoic, and is really cool just because it replicates the Torosaurus from Walking with Dinosaurs quite nicely. Now the figure is definitely going to be stiff again. I have not really moved it around. It's another one of those instances where I just opened the package, brought it straight in for the review, so I haven't had a chance to wear the parts in or anything like that for the figure. But of course, as far as articulation goes, you have the articulated jaw, which definitely moves and works quite nicely. We also have a spot of articulation right here, where you can get a nice head tilt and stuff. You can go up, you can go down. Not a whole lot in the way of a range of movement, but definitely decent enough to get some good poses and stuff. And as you can see while I was moving that spot, you've also got a spot here on the bottom of the neck as well. I can kind of maneuver the neck around a little bit. Again, very stiff currently, but you've also got a spot here in the front leg in like the shoulder area. You've also got the elbow here, which is definitely a little stiff, but can move. You can see it's just wearing in as I go. You can really see it's starting to become a little bit smoother. And then you've also got wrist articulation, which can swivel around a little bit, can also go up and down. Definitely moves quite nicely. You've also got the midsection articulation right here, which can go pretty much anywhere. You can go up and down, left and right a little bit with it. There we go. We'll get a little bit of a turn for the midsection. And then you've also got the hip articulation right here, which is really stiff apparently. The knee, yeah, the knee's not going to move at all. I almost always have problems with the knees of my figures being stiff straight out of the packaging. It's not until I warm them up that they really start to move, but the knee is really stiff. But again, you do have the articulation of the knee. And then two areas down here in the ankle, which allows you some nice posability for the figure. That's one area I usually don't have any problems with, is the ankle. It's normally the knees and like the elbows and stuff, occasionally the neck and everything. And then you've also got a tail back here, some tail articulation for the figure as well. So pretty much your standard when it comes to the Beasts of the Mesozoic and the Ceratopsian series specifically. But I don't feel like we really need to measure this one. I don't feel like we need really many comparisons or anything like that, because we've done all of that with the initial review of the figure, and again, it was the exact same sculpt, so not much in the way of that stuff that we need, but I definitely want a comparison between this and the older one. So here are the two different variants of the Torosaurus. Now, again, looking at them, it's really hard to tell which one's my favorite. You got the really cool looking bluish version here with, again, a really flashy paint scheme, and you also have the kind of Walking with Dinosaurs style version with a more naturalistic, less flashy, but still somewhat flashy paint scheme. So I think it really probably depends on your preference as to which one you might prefer. If you like really flashy versions of your dinosaurs, I would definitely say go with the original, the bluish version. But if you like stuff that looks a little more, potentially natural, what we would like to think could potentially be the coloration, or at least as far as my own personal preference goes, what I think could potentially be the coloration of a Torosaurus in real life, I think the Walking with Dinosaurs version, the Fans Choice version, might be the more appealing one to go with. But they really do both look cool. Again, actually having them here, I thought for sure I would be able to pick one over the other. I thought I'd definitely have a favorite, but I actually don't think I do. Like, it's really tough to tell which one I prefer, and both really do look quite beautiful as a whole, which is just another moment of the Beasts of the Mesozoic killing it again continuously when they release a repaint that looks just as good, potentially better, but too hard to choose between from the first one. Again, another killer paint scheme here on this Torosaurus. I will say, though, that I did just notice one difference between the two. If you look at the hip of my older one, it's a lot smoother when it goes out, but the hip of the newer one kind of extends out a little bit. I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if that's just the articulation messing with it, or what exactly is going on with the difference between the hips, but that's definitely something I'm going to have to look into once the review is over. Maybe I just need to readjust those. But I did want to point that out because I did just notice it right now and figured it was worth mentioning, even if it is just a simple situation of the leg being articulated in an awkward spot. I still wanted to point it out. So this brand new Walking with Dinosaurs style Torosaurus from the Beasts of the Mesozoic, this is a Fans Choice release, is another really nice release. Again, another really nice Ceratopsian. It's not one of the flashiest paint schemes to come along for the Fans Choice line. I would definitely give that to the previous two that I have reviewed, but it's also one of the more natural, I think, paint schemes that we've seen, and it's also one of the more iconic paint schemes that we've seen, because the Walking with Dinosaurs Torosaurus is something that even I, at times, have tried to kind of emulate and repaint, and having a really big version here, a 1/18th scale version from the Beasts of the Mesozoic, is definitely really cool. And if you are a fan of Walking with Dinosaurs, I really feel like it's pretty much a must-have. Definitely something you would want to add to your collection. And they did do a very good job on this. Again, the sculpt is phenomenal, just like it was the first time around. There's no real difference or anything between the older version and the newer version as far as the sculpt goes. But the paint job is just really beautiful as a whole. They definitely did a great job as far as the application of the paint, as well as replicating the Walking with Dinosaurs Torosaurus paint scheme. All of the paint throughout the course of the figure looks primarily like body color. The Beasts of the Mesozoic always have really nice paint apps where they apply a lot of washes, a lot of dry brushing to highlight the detail. They always have nice smooth transitions between colors, and if it's supposed to be an abrupt transition, it'll look like that perfect abrupt transition. Sometimes if you create a paint job with like a really abrupt transition like that, it's hard to kind of get the edges to look like that would be the color transition of the dinosaur, more so than just kind of looking like sloppy paint. And that's not what I see on this one. Again, the paintwork and the transitions, everything looks really good through the course of the entire figure, as they always do when it comes to a Beasts of the Mesozoic release. And I love the fact that, again, it is a Walking with Dinosaurs style version, because even though I was a big fan of the bluish version, I feel like this is the more naturalistic looking version of the two. I feel like it definitely looks like it could be the coloration of a Torosaurus a lot more so than the bluish version. Not trying to take anything away from the blue one, because the blue one's awesome, but I just feel like this one as a whole is a more natural looking version of the Torosaurus, and probably one of my favorite paint schemes that we've seen through the entire Ceratopsian series. Definitely a really nice looking version as a whole. And of course, when it comes to a Ceratopsian series release, it's loaded with articulation like they always are, opening up a world of possibilities as far as display options go. So if you are interested in picking this up, I will include a link in the description to where you can purchase this on the Creative Beast Studio website. So make sure you follow the link in the description. It'll take you straight to the listing for this Torosaurus, so make sure you also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.